My only complaints with the PvP are there's just not enough, and there's a ton of basic features outside of gameplay that are just flat out missing. There's only 3 game modes. There's only 3 maps. You can the most baffling thing to me is that in a 6v6 game, you can only queue up with 2 other people.
Hello everyone, and welcome to a discussion from Warhammer Lore Masters about the current state of Warhammer gaming. It's in a pretty good time recently in the beloved year of 2024. Not can be said for a lot of other things, but in terms of Warhammer gaming, we've had some big releases, particularly this year. We've had some other games come out in the last few years, and it's sort of in a bit of an uprise. We're going higher and higher, and we want to talk about some of the things that have come out recently as of time of recording, and we just want to kind of discuss it. Obviously, this is between Lore Masters here. I've got Andy, who's the Remembrancer, and Colin from Pancreas No Work, who are my beloved brothers in arms. Today's first one is Space Marine 2. Now, this one for us has only just dropped a few weeks ago. We were riding a hype train for quite a lot of it, and I mean, I'm just interested to hear how you guys have been enjoying it, because my small review of it is I very much would give it like an 8 out of 10. I've very much been enjoying it.
Would you like to go first, Colin?
Sure. I would say at the moment it is an 8 out of 10 in the making, because there are many small things I think holding it back. How about I'll start with this: the core gameplay loop, phenomenal. It's so fun.
Absolutely.
The singular criticism I have for the core gameplay is that I wish executions were kind of closer to the first game, where they gave you a little bit of health back, and because now they make you invincible, what you did in the first game, but you only get armor back, so it's a lot harder to use it to get out of a horrible situation, I feel, or at least sustain yourself. But that minor criticism aside, which is honestly more of a personal taste thing than I think it's something wrong with the game, gameplay's great. Multiplayer is a whole lot of fun. Operations, I think, are a nice way to get both some character progression, give you something to replay, and also it's from a narrative standpoint, it's cool to showcase it, even though Titus and the other two are the main boy band. The Ultramarines as a whole are going to war. Like there is stuff happening off screen.
Ultra's back. All right.
But the progression system is, I do not like having to pick between either upgrading my character or actually customizing my dude. I appreciate that some things can be unlocked, but if you want to be anything but an Ultramarine, you need to, and you care about operations, you need to make a choice. Like, you can't just be like, no, there's a different currency for, aesthetic stuff, for example.
Yeah.
The way it works is infuriating, where you need to get an emblem and then a color.
Yeah, there's a weird thing of to give you my perspective, I've maxed out the heavy class. I've got a level 22 bulwark. All my other classes are about level 10. And I have 4 relic, which is the gold token stockpiled. I have 10 of the pink ones and about 25 green ones. Those tokens aren't doing anything, and there isn't a way to cash them in for the generic currency, where that if I could be I can convert my armor tokens I can't use into generic currency to buy cosmetics, that'd be really good. From my experience, according to my Xbox tracking device, I have killed about 30,000 enemies so far. I'm almost at that 40,000 achievement for killing 40,000 enemies, which is kind of fun. I've done all the operations. I did my first game of Versus today, and I smashed it as a bulwark. We had 200 to 100 on King of the Hill, which was fun. And it's just my worry with Space Marine 2, as great as it is, it's longevity wise, even me, who's I'm scrapping as much time as I can to play it outside of making videos. It's I've maxed out almost 2 characters. There's 4 to go. We're halfway there with all of them. I've got all these tokens stockpiled. you can only kill a Tyranid so many times before you're like, oh, what's next? You know?
Well, that's just, I was like, particularly for us, obviously, we all know Warhammer lore. Like, obviously, it's our job, so we know it quite well. And I would say, like, going through it, let's start right with the campaign itself. From a lore perspective, so if someone is listening and they're not necessarily like a super, like, I know if you don't know a ton about Warhammer lore, it's very, very faithful. It's not the most, like, in terms of the like planets, like we are on like Avarax, and I forgot the other one, which was like the Dead Planet world, but they are somewhat pretty faithful. Like the entire experience of the actual campaign is a very Warhammer 40k. Like they nailed that down very well compared to other games. Yeah, compared to other games that we will like talk about as well. Like, isn't again like there's not that. It's very much a war zone thing, and to remember when you're tackling with Warhammer things in particular, compared to other games, Warhammer itself is more of a setting. It's like a playground. It's a Dungeons and Dragons campaign that will never end. And so if you compare it to games like, I don't know, like Red Dead Redemption 2 or other things like The Last of Us, and obviously like games like that will always be like a 10 out of 10 like knockout, because it's like it's a satisfying, fulfilling story arc. But Warhammer 40k it's been a universe at war for 10,000 years, so it's going like you'll never get to the end of a Space Marine game ever, I think, and be like, wow, I'm glad that character arc is over. It just won't happen. But from the campaign perspective, I very much really liked the campaign. I think it didn't overstay its welcome for a lot of it. And I think for a lot of people, again, like there's so many things that got people to offshoot and kind of get into, like, you start off just playing a Space Marine, that's part of the Ultramarines chapter, obviously the box art boys, and that's just straight up like the power fantasy obviously is very, very real and very enjoyable. Obviously if anyone plays a tabletop game, it's balanced differently, so you might your Space Marine Lieutenant Titus will probably not slap as hard on the tabletop, but I very much have enjoyed it. I think the planets, again, seem like really environment-wise, it's all really well done. It kind of captures the tone quite well, particularly in like the intro cinematic. Everyone knows with the chaplain. Oh my god, I particularly enjoyed that. Do you guys have any particular standout moments from the campaign that you're like? Obviously, I know more towards the end, everyone's got their favorite point.
Right.
But like,
mine would have been a spoiler.
Do you want positivity or negativity standouts?
Do both.
How about I'll be positive? It's what was it? This might be small, but every time you see the guard in action doing their thing, like the opening mission, the Valkyries come in and blow away the horde descending on you. At one point, you just see an entire armored column running by. There's a cutscene where a Chimera breaks down a door, and they went to the detail of having it turn its turret so that it wouldn't get like stuck or break on the door, which was just so cool. And there's like guard speeches and stuff like that a lot. There's
one bit where like you're fighting Carnifexes and they're a pain in the ass, and there's one point where Lehman Russ just plows through one.
Oh yeah,
in like you're going up a flight of stairs and it's like and it just like no, it just runs it over. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. It's like, yeah, as cool as a Space Marine is, the Guard have their moments.
If we're avoiding spoilers, I'll probably have that as my highlight. As my negative.
Yeah, or you can do spoilers if you want as well. I think this is very much a review of like the experience of this and other games as it currently stands for Warhammer.
Well, we've mostly avoided it, but in that case, here's just the warning for anyone listening: click away. Spoilers ahead. Full blown, everything spoilers. Papa Smurf coming in, firing into the horde without having his arms move from the resting position. Was the coolest thing I've seen in my life.
That cutscene still like just goes hard, and the voice acting particularly is really good in the game. I was quite hesitant about because the previous voice actor for Titus was Mark Strong, who's a very well-known actor, and so I was like, oh man, I don't know if this. the new one grew on me, and I was very much like, it sounds like a regular.
Not being funny, like the guy who does it, I don't know his name, but he was Rollo in the Vikings TV series. Because of the fact that he's not like a super high profile actor, I felt like that was a better way for him to be like, I'm not distracted when I listen to Space Marine 1. I'm like, oh, that's Mark Strong. Oh, it's also a Space Marine game. It's like, no, that's just Titus. And he did a fantastic job. And the guy who did the voice of Calgar did a great job. Like all the voice actors, I think, did a great job. Yeah, even though I bitched the whole time in my playthrough of like the Cicatrix guard who's just standing in the observation area where you're doing the missions with his shield, and like, you're doing nothing. You're like one of the most powerful Ultramarines. You're doing nothing, and then like Calgar appears, like, oh, there he is. About time. By the time you did something.
I think particularly,
but still.
Again, like, I know, weirdly enough, is it Focus Entertainment? This is not necessarily like a AAA game, maybe like a AA game or something in between. But particularly, like, as it stands, like, we haven't really had an equivalent to something like what Space Marine 2 has delivered. And obviously, from a like we're all massive Warhammer like fan perspective, particularly Colin, who's like even more like Ultramarine than what probably me and Andy are. It's a big. It just delivers hard.
I need to change the headline.
Colin is, for the audio listeners, his old headline was "Give me old world books," and now it is the greatest
of them all.
Yeah, but I must admit, like, one thing I really love about this game is from my perspective, bearing in mind of all, I think it's fair to say, of all of us, I do like a lot of bespoke videos about, here's a weird chapter, and at this time we've only got like a bunch of like, we got like obviously your main legions, we've got your Black Templars, we've got your Blood Ravens, but we've got like a good pool of generic chapters, and I don't mean that in a bad way. And because there's a Ultramarines DLC pack on things like the Praetors of Orpheus, the Libators.
Yeah, I know who
I don't know why there's. Where the hell are the Silver Skulls? I'm gonna put that out there. Where are the Silver Skulls? But other than that, there's lots of weird, strange chapters. And with the release of Space Marine 2, because I've done videos on like not all, but a lot of these chapters, I've had so many comments like, "Oh, I was playing Space Marine 2, and I thought this heraldry was cool, and then I looked on YouTube and I found your video. I like the chapter. I like the color scheme. Thanks very much." And I think that's, I think this is like our, this is the most significant game for the entire setting. And there might be more to follow, but Dark Tide's fun, but you're playing as a rabble of like convicts / nobodies.
Rejects.
Yeah.
Space Marine 1 was cool, but didn't have the same customization. It had a great customization, but it's not the same thing. As far as entry points to the lore, I think this is the single most significant thing that has ever been released for Warhammer content. Because as much as we're all like, oh, maybe Amazon TV show will be great, this isn't just like, here's some Warhammer stuff. It's like, here's some Warhammer stuff, and you can pick what you want to be in the setting. And I can't stress enough how much that's an understated thing of like, hey, do you want to be a Storm Giant? You want to be a Salamander? You want to be a Raven Guard? You want to be a Black Templar? You want to be a Space Wolf? You want to be whatever. And even the factions that don't have, quote, established color schemes, like I made a Mentor. I made a Mentor Marine because they're my favorite chapter, because the color schemes that were available allowed me to do that. And I think this is the most significant boost or flagpole moment in the Warhammer space that's ever been released, in my opinion.
As it currently stands, again, like, there's no current announcement for more projects of this scale, but we only hope to see more once more people are interested in the setting. Again, like, there'll be more other games that are willing to have a go at the Warhammer IP, because again, it's such a good resource to draw on. Warhammer Space Marine 2 is that playing as a Space Marine is a perfect game, but there's so much more to Warhammer than necessarily just Space Marines. So there's so much more options to see. Again, hopefully there's other enemy types in the future.
I will still die on this hill if I want my Guard versus Tau Battlefield clone so badly.
I think so. Although again, like, okay, sorry.
I was going to say though, like with the whole point you were saying about people getting, how many posts have you seen about people going like they start the game, they get through the first mission, and then they're in the battle barge and they see the cherub for the first time, and they go, "What is that?" And that's like the quintessential, like that's perfect placement, perfect timing of like, I really love this game, huh? And they're like, they see that, and it's a stark reminder of like, this is not a candy floss and
rainbows,
prosecco setting. Candy. Like this is bad. And I love every time I see any comment about the cherubs, because people getting into the setting, they're like, oh, this is a badass Space Marine. Oh, he's a badass. Oh, Chaplin's cool. Bolters. And then they see that and they go, huh? And then that's the first injection of, you have a lot to learn in a way.
I don't think an Imperium story is properly done if it in some way doesn't disturb you with just how wrong mankind is in 40K, and they did very good with that.
I mean, at the end of the Space Marine 2 campaign, they win and they shout for the Emperor, but I'm pretty sure both planets are destroyed in terms of like it's over. Like I'm very sure they kind of like it's always Pyrrhic victory in Warhammer, which is good, and I think they very much they didn't a lot of like the story elements, they didn't oversell it. They had some cool elements from the setting that they picked in, and again, like, the people who work at Focus who made this game know their stuff, and they drew, I think, really well from that in the campaign.
And fair play to Saber Interactive as
well. Oh yeah. I think the next part here is to talk about operations. So we will talk about other things in the game. But wrapping up on kind of Space Marine 2 here. As we stand, there's only like currently at the time recording 6 operations, which I do feel is like the slight letdown of the game. If there was like 10, maybe 12, I'd almost put the game up to like a 9 or 10.
Can we go back to the campaign for a bit? I'm gonna with you. I have negative thoughts.
No, that's valid.
First one, and feel free to call this one a skill issue, but that mission with the Ripper Swarm is just not fun. The flamer pyroblaster thing sucks against.
Oh yeah, it sucks so bad.
The Rippers are such a pain. It completely kills the flow of the game. I appreciate it breaks up like the main gameplay a bit. It's something different. It's not a fun different. It's just,
I think it overstayed its welcome. It would have been cool. It was half the length of time.
That would probably help it a lot, but even any of that was just not fun.
I must say, as someone who's done like all the difficulty modes of operations, I would say, and the campaign, I feel like the enemies are a teensy bit too spongy, and that is like with the pyroblasters. Like this should like you only get it in that one mission. You can't use it in any operations or versus. It's just localized to that one mission. It should absolutely destroy. Like, brother, give me the flamer, the heavy flamer. It's like, I want that to completely decimate anything that's a whiff near it. And when you're playing the game, even on like a lower difficulty, like normal mode, it feels really underpowered. And like when I'm playing as a bulwark, I feel like the enemies, it should be a case of I hit you with the sword, you become half of what you were. You should be in 2 pieces. But instead, they take a hit, and then you do another hit, and they die. And it's like, I feel like another thing. Recently, I feel like the devs have snuck in a bunch of changes where, for example, when I was playing Bulwark, it now seems that the enemies can break your banner while you're playing. And also, there's like way more enemies than I ever remember there being during like average difficulty on operations. And I think they've been like, oh, this is too easy. We're going to add all this stuff, but at the same time, it's like it's threading that needle of you're a space marine. You want to feel the power fantasy, but also have challenge. And I think they've maybe overdone it with certain weapons, certain classes. Like I know a lot of people saying the melee builds are a bit underpowered. Like if I'm using a thunder hammer, I don't expect anything that gets hit by a thunder hammer that's like not an extremist level enemy to survive one thwack. And there's, but again, this is the thing: is over time, I'm sure they will make adjustments and such. But it's going to be a case of how are they going to make longevity a priority?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So things that. Oh, okay. Sorry, good.
I had some issues with the narrative as well.
Go for it.
The setting, like the setting stuff, like the presentation of the game is phenomenal. I'm gonna level with you. The narratives of Space Marine 2 is there because we need to have reasons to fight the Tyranids and Thousand Suns. Like this is, I do not feel anyone who isn't a Warhammer lore channel should buy this game for the narrative. And quite frankly, I don't think the game is worth buying if we're only buying it for the lore of like the narrative.
The Tyranids are kind of like they're just an appetizer to an extent. Like they don't feel like a threat. They're just like, oh, the Tyranids are here. It's like weeding the garden. It's like we get rid of the Tyranids. Oh, the Thousand Suns are here. Real threat. And that's
I think the game was missing. I think it missed a character death, as in like to really put the impact of like the Thousand Suns faction in it. Say like the captain guy of like the Scottish man in the vessel. If he actually got clapped in the game, I feel like the game would have a different tone. Again, like
I have like a more edgy take, right?
My justification is that even Space Marine 1, it got across the tone a bit more like Space Marines aren't necessarily invincible. There was a character, well, in quotes, character death within Space Marine 2, but it's someone who you never even saw take their helmet off, and they were like a sergeant, and you don't really, it didn't have an emotional impact. But that
would you like to? Good point. Would you like to hear my pitch of an idea, which will never happen because it's already released? But like, you know that bit where Chiron becomes a bit coordinate berserk and he defies your orders and he goes a bit mental?
Little bit Blood Angel-y.
Yeah. I think what they should have done, he should have died in that moment. And then your squad mate is the chaplain. And then you get to understand like, oh, here's the chaplain. He doesn't like me. Here's a guy who's on his side. And you have the perfect melting pot of like, I don't like the chaplain because I'm the main character. My other character friend, Gadriel, he likes the chaplain. And then you can have a perfect meld of Gadriel is in the middle. Titus's deeds are jarring with his beliefs in the chaplain's ordained truth. And the chaplain goes from like, because one thing about the chaplain is, I won't spoil anything, but like the chaplain is just there. He doesn't fight. He doesn't do anything. He's a bit of a meh character. And it's like if he was in the campaign as like as a replacement for Chiron, then you could say, okay, you get to understand maybe his reservations. You get to understand his perspective because he fights with you. And it's not just him in the sidelines going, I know you killed all these thousand suns and you killed these Tyranid swarms. You saved this planet. You did all this. You survived the Rubicon Primaris. You did this and this, but you still suck. And it's like, no, if he was in the thick of it with you, I would give him a bit more leeway because then at least I could understand his perspective, and you could have a bit where he's like, I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm just trying to be like, my priorities as a chaplain are more important than you. And you could maybe reconciliate like, hey, I understand that. And maybe, and then also with the ending the campaign, you could reconcile, not reconcile totally, but you could say like, hey, I don't agree with you, but I understand what you're talking about. And you could
funny
also
enough, I feel like you might have stepped onto what possibly maybe in the future plans of the game is heavily indicated in some kind of way. So you say like, again, like Space Marine 2 is more about, I don't feel like it's a direct, like it's clearly going to have a link to the events of Space Marine 1 in a small way in the main game. Perhaps what future stuff will come out for the game maybe links more towards Space Marine 1. But I was happy for the fact like it's left open in terms of like we know it's going to be explored. But I wasn't like hanging on by a thread going like I need my Space Marine 2 continuation of certain character plot lines. I was very much happy for like Titus to sort of, you know, at the end of the day, like I think in terms of like what Warhammer games are now, they are like I said before earlier, like it's very much getting people into the hobby and the universe. I don't think it was about writing a coherent character arc for Titus. I don't think he necessarily, you know what I mean? Like he had like a slight, like there is character arc in the game.
Well,
but they're not drastic. They're not life changing. They're just like someone had a bit of a mess up, and then they've learned to overcome a small mistake that they made. A small mistake.
All I would say is that the big hanger on from the last game is why is Titus resistant to chaos, and the whole game we have no idea. And there is a point where like arguably
they answer it at the end.
At the end there's like arguably a point where a very important person tells them to like stop being a bitch, get good, get up, and it's like okay, maybe he's got like ordained powers from that person, but other than that,
no, not even that. You don't remember the cutscene after that where you know Big Papa Smurf goes, "You're just such a good, devoted, loyal boy. That's why you're immune."
Yeah. But may I go into
spoiler warning for people?
For a couple of seconds,
blew my load about Calgar. Go nuts.
Well, the bit where you kill the final boss, there's a bit where there's a voice dialogue, and you've blown up the thing, and then there's someone who goes, "Rise." It's like that's clearly the Emperor. Like, but in the Emperor himself has given him like.
It does say that.
Yeah, but then he wakes up, and then it's like Chiron's there, Gadriel's there, and then Calgar's like, "Rise, you pussy." So okay, I understand that, but like before that, there's a black screen with nothing, and then the Emperor himself goes, "Hey, I'm not done with you." And in that regard, it's like okay.
But I think they had the same. It was the same voice actor who did Calgar, so that's why I think it's a bit of a mess up. But it is that one was a very like when I first heard that I was like, oh my god, yeah. So from a lore perspective, that was pretty.
How did it come?
Okay, well, I mean, like for a lot of people who are listening and maybe aren't as into Warhammer lore, they might not get like how significant that part of the game, like how much of a big hint there is. I mean, to put it into like, it's hard to put into context, which is like is essentially like God told him to get up. So it's a very cool moment.
I
liked it. It gave me. I liked it. I wasn't like it's the best thing I've ever seen.
I liked it, but I'll just be frank with you, gentlemen, and also anyone listening. Play this game because the story is fun and lets you kill Tyranids and Thousand Sons, no questions asked. I can give you 3 layers on why the narrative is meaningless functionally. 1. You know nothing about 40K. You play the game. The Titus and the squad don't like each other. I bet $50 they're going to get over their differences at the end. And sure enough, in a literal burst of magic, Titus is cleared when the Psyker is proven to be a traitor. Like, there's no proper resolvement. And
then the end bit was just like, hey, Gadriel, and he's just like, you know what, that thing over there, if we turn it upside down, I think we'll win.
It's like
okay, cool.
Fair's fair. A possessed person, declaring you a heretic, and then you find out they're possessed. Pretty good way to clear your name. So the means aren't the bad part. It's just like they don't talk, and then after the scene, they like Titus is like, I finally admit I didn't tell you enough after the previous 5 hours of me refusing to tell you a single goddamn thing, and even ignoring that, you never played Warhammer once. There's gonna be there's gonna be a twist because like there's still a bunch of levels to go left, and something has to happen. I guarantee you the big thing isn't going to solve the issues. Sure enough, it doesn't. If you are familiar with Warhammer, the Thousand Sons are involved, so you know for a fact it's Tzeentch. There's going to be something that goes wrong just as planned nonsense. And even if you don't.
I was going to say, like the interesting thing about like this game and the first game is both have enemies that are the epitome in the 40k universe of disposable. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
you're killing Rubricae, who gives a shit? You're killing orcs in the first game, who gives a shit? You're killing Tyranids that have no character. Like, these are the factions you would pick of, like, it doesn't matter how many you kill, doesn't matter how many multiplayer games, killing like dozens or even thousands of these guys. There's always more, because the Thousand Sons are automatons, the Tyranid are a swarm of bugs, and the orcs are just lads who like fighting and only have like 5 main characters. After this game, it's difficult to pick a faction that could be like, oh, we're gonna fight this. I know a lot of people don't like Fire Warrior because of the fact that you can kill like several Raptors, Space Marines, and other Space Marines. Like, huh? You're a weedy little towel fella. You can't do that. That's illegal.
I do think the game does one thing that the others games and that you don't mention. I think it does well where it doesn't overreach, because a lot of things can go wrong with a lot of games where like they try and do everything at once. I think particularly Warhammer games need to realize like they don't need to be. I think a lot of this is at the current time. Like a lot of games have tried to be like your only game, so it's an expensive game with a massive file size that you're designed to play for literally hundreds and hundreds of hours. Space Marine 2 is a short. I would say, like, again, if there's a little bit more in the operations content, I would have put this at like a 9 out of 10 experience in terms of like I had such a good time. Like I went out for a good meal, and then I left the restaurant. I didn't stay there too long, and then I was like, I want to go home.
Left tip,
or I'm not stuck like an Overwatch player who just plays his Overwatch 2 because I'm chasing that brief high of win.
I want to have my Ace of Spades do 5% more damage by doing a week's worth of work to make it slightly better. Like, yeah. But like,
I feel I should add that as much as I was just going off about it, I don't mind that the story is kind of weak, because all it needs to do is be there to give me an excuse to fight the cool enemies, and it does that perfectly.
And not being funny, you kill a big Thousand Sons guy who's not really like Chaos Gate. You fight Mortarion at the end of it. Like, that's a big deal.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, it's Demon Primarch. Mortarion is like, I don't need that. Like, honestly, a Space Marine sort of game or a Warhammer game in general, I need to deal a blow against a faction, but something that they can recover from, so that we can have another game in the future, or it doesn't interrupt the main flow of the story.
I think the next one, if they ever do it again, I hope it's something to do with Necrons, in terms of like, just as like it'll be as in like not in like the first Horde enemy, but like I don't mind the formula, because again, the gameplay loop is just so much fun. Like I played this game and I've only been left wanting more of it. I haven't played it enough to get sick of it yet, but I'm very much glad that I would say with this game they particularly nailed quite a lot of it down. There's only one more thing I think will just for Space Marine 2, I think that's very much like it could have used a bit more love, which is PvP. And Andy, have you played much of the PvP?
I have played one game today.
Well,
nice.
me and Colin,
won. To be fair, I kicked their ass, but still.
Colin, what's your opinions on the PvP?
I think it's a phenomenally fun system. That I like the maps. I feel they flow into gameplay pretty well. The game modes are fun. The balance is phenomenal. Like, I don't think there's one class that's like noticeably worse than the others. And before everyone piles in to say assault, like I can almost guarantee you so many people will, maybe stop jumping and diving into the enemy team like a moron, and you won't get melted. There's just some pro gamer advice before I hear the next 5,000 assault sucks comments. Maybe just some advice.
It's like the only game I played as a bulwark, and it was King of the Hill game mode, and there were points where I didn't go on the aggression. I just held my shield up and I blocked enemies and I marked them for my teammates, and then the assaults came in and the snipers came in. They killed 4 enemies that I was just blocking their shots for, because they weren't, and they got all the kills, but it was like, we have 3 objectives captured, and it's like you have to understand the role of your class.
This might be the most well-balanced PvP I've ever seen, short of games where it's like everyone has the same options, like COD or Halo.
I know
the
that
Genesis machines get a 10% bonus on everything.
I think people have said they wish to increase like player size. Again, like I don't know if that will disturb the balance of the game, because already like a 1v1 is a true like test of like I feel like it's always 50-50, like I've got a chance to win it. 2v1 is immediate death. Isn't like you can possibly win a 2v1. Yeah, I think for future PvP things, the balance of the game is in a good state. I think again, just if it gives a bit more love, it'll get again, like it could be it's not like a professional esport thing, but I'm very much glad like it's a functioning thing that lets people again just like experience the fun of it. Warhammer is like a lot of fun, and so therefore it doesn't need to be more than essentially entertaining and a good experience, I think.
My only complaints with the PvP are there's just not enough, and there's a ton of basic features outside of gameplay that are just flat out missing. There's only 3 game modes. There's only 3 maps. You can the most baffling thing to me is that in a 6v6 game, you can only queue up with 2 other people. What is that logic? Like I get it for the operations and campaign. Fine. You only want 3 players. That's your design choice. Whatever. Why do I need to? Why can I only queue up with 2 other people for multiplayer? That's absurd.
I know a lot of people are getting really frustrated with the fact that you can't play 2 of the same classes in operations, and I kind of get that, but it's like not being funny. Let people all they need to do is when you queue up to a game, have it so that you lock in your class, and then when you have that selection of all the classes, instead of having all 6, and then you dump into the battle barge, and then there's like a guy who's going, "Hey, I'm playing as a tactical, actually, go away." So, okay, don't give me that option, and at least I know what other people are playing. Especially, like, it works with when people are in a mission. Just do the same in the battle barge, and then that way you evade some of the discomfort. And
that can be frustrating, but I just mean like the multiplayer PvP. Like why? If Eli was here, us 4 could not search together for a match. It would be no, that's not allowed.
Yeah, that's
There's too many of you. That also, what the hell is that crossplay thing for PvP? I get their reasoning, fine, sure. PC players, because you're using the mouse and keyboard a bit of advantage. I've never in my life once heard someone say that shouldn't be a feature for that reason. Just turn off crossplay if it bothers you that much. Like the fact that you and I to begin with can't play PvP is why? Yeah. Just turn off crossplay for people it bothers that much.
I mean, not being funny, like I think I've dunked a lot of PC players doing the co-op game modes.
Oh no, I'm not saying like it's
like this game mode is not an FPS where you have a distinct advantage. It's like if you know how to parry and use melee in the melee builds, it doesn't make a difference. Shooting, it's like this isn't a headshot shooter like Halo. It's like it's fine. It's not Gears of War. You'll be fine. I think the disparity between consoles, or in this case console or PC, is actually lesser than a lot of other game modes or games, I should say. It's not the same as playing Halo and be like, oh, these console noobs can't shoot a grunt in the face for what it's worth. Like, no, it doesn't matter because that's not an instant headshot. The multiplayer is not that way inclined. It's a third-person shooter.
You're also like you're playing Space Marines. They're big targets.
Yeah.
The better aiming doesn't matter that much. It's hard to miss. Bridges
with heads.
Yeah. And like my last thing again, there's no custom games yet, and I know for a fact what I can. That's why I feel I can say with confidence if they held off one more month, multiplayer would like have so many more features, because that roadmap they released is like, yeah, there's to be some new PvE stuff. We're gonna add custom gamings. At least they didn't call it custom games. They were like homemade battle barge, slam dunk, battle royale, whatever the hell, like Warhammer terminology they used. To me, at least sounded, yeah, we're adding custom games. Like there's my gripes with the multiplayer are that there's so many features they should just add but they haven't for reasons
yeah. And I worry, like, for a lot of, like, particularly, we obviously really want people and a lot more people just to kind of get into the hobby and get in, enjoy the space with us. And I worry, like, if a game or Space Marine 2 can like pique someone's interest, but then if it's a good enough experience, will it hold someone's interest? Because again, like, there's so much this hobby has in terms of things people can enjoy. Space Marine 2 is very much like it gets all the right elements, but it's a taste test in terms of like there again is a great video game, and there can be hopefully some more great video games, particularly that use that as like a frame, as in this is a building block.
Yeah.
Hopefully this is the start of like, because there's been Warhammer games for like a long time that have been coming out, like since even the 90s, even before I was not playing them, I wasn't even aware of what Warhammer was. There's been a lot of misses, so it's really good to have one which is such a it's a good hit.
It's not even just, it's like in the last couple of years we have Dark Tide, Chaos Gate, Blood, Shooters and Teeth. We've had the Speed Freaks game.
Fun.
We've had a bunch of Warhammer games. We had a chess game.
Regicide.
Just
I own that.
It was just, do you want to play chess? But instead of like taking a pawn, you bludgeon it to death with a thunder hammer. Like, not being funny, that's a kind of cool gimmick. But at the same time, it's like this is the single most palatable Warhammer game we've ever had.
Yeah.
Because if you play Dark Tide, it's like you need friends. You need 3 other people. If you play Space Marine 2, it's a third-person shooter. Everyone loves them. The skill tree is not too high. There's tons of stuff that rewards you for playing, and you can do, like, not being funny, cross play alone is a really big deal. Like, as an Xbox player, there's something like 20 games you can play that have crossplay. That's it. A brand new game coming out with crossplay is immense, and it also has the benefit of you can customize your Space Marines to any conceivable chapter, even though that like there's a select amount of chapters you can do. And I also like the feature of like all the colors are named after paints you can buy in Warhammer stores, which is kind of fun. But it's like theoretically, I mean, Colin, I think you're a Crayon Marine, aren't you?
Indeed, my Vanguard is Brother Crayolas, or no, my Assault Marine.
Being able to do kind of any chapter again is like such a big, I think, draw and bonus to so many people who are gonna, again, like with your Warhammer channel, there's so many different things in Warhammer where again, like, they expand more. There's so many interesting things that people can go look up, and then you were surprised. Like, again, it's pretty neat that they've very much got so many things right in terms of the actual experience and like what Warhammer authentically is. I don't think, again, it's not my favorite game ever, but like I very much enjoyed it, and I probably enjoyed it more than someone who doesn't know much about Warhammer, because again, it was like an extra layer of like, this is the thing I like a lot, and it was just done well. But speaking of a game that's somewhat, it's more of like a precursor. Like, I would assume this is the one which is like showing an indicator of like Warhammer games like turning around slightly and coming into like the good category, is Bolt Gun, which Colin, I believe you've actually like played through fully as well.
Big fun. Big fun.
I mean, it's again like a reminiscent of Doom, the classic experience of that.
Yeah,
the Doom Eternal is amazing. But I think it's one of those ones, like, I always thought, I did think initially like this is like a very safe bet in terms of games being chosen for Warhammer, but I do think it kind of fits. Again, like Doom is of that era in which Warhammer sort of, like, again, like Warhammer is been around for quite a while, so I don't think it's inappropriate that it's like sort of not like riding the coattails, but it very much leached onto a thing that, luckily, like that style of game has come back into back into like sort of the mainstream.
I mean, there's a nice charm to Bolt Gun with being like, hey, we're going to unabashedly do a homage to the 90s games. Like, remember when you could play a first-person shooter and you had health bars and you didn't have regenerating health, and you could carry 1 billion guns and you could kill 1 billion enemies, and it's hyper masculine. There's a nice thing with like games like that coming out and just going, hey, we don't care about the current trends. We really enjoy playing this when we're growing up. We venerate these games from the past. Let's do our own spin on it. And people resonate with that because I think these days, especially, there are so many games companies who are like, oh, we need to chase trends. We need to do a replica of this thing that was popular rather than having passion projects, because passion projects are risky, and if they do badly, they drown a company.
We want an always online 1,000 hours game commitment sort of thing with barely any content in updates
and a battle pass.
But again, it's nice to see, like, particularly Bolt Gun does it much better, but Space Marine 2 is kind of in that vein of, it was a bit more of like someone just wanted to make a good game. I think Bolt Gun particularly just draws on Warhammer so well in the fact, like, it has so much to do with, like, it doesn't need to reinvent any part of Warhammer. It just needs to, like, essentially be in the playground. I don't know if you felt that way, Colin. Like, every enemy or like boss battle was pretty much like, hey, that's the thing I know. And they didn't need to, like, it wasn't like that thing in Warhammer doesn't work here. It was like that thing here works like beautifully and it slotted in perfectly.
Yeah, it's a big scary enemy in a boomer shooter. It did what it needed to be, which was be hard to beat. You get a big weapon, you fire at it, and it's a great time. The heavy bolter is wonderful. Every weapon in that game is great. It's just distilled fun.
Yeah, I think because
a lot of the chainsword that blows ass.
It is thematic, though, to be fair. As an actual, like, just what is essentially a chainsaw in a box. I don't know how effective it should be. But yeah, Bolt Gun seems to do something well where, like, it wasn't trying to be more than what was like a short, fun experience. Again, it's not trying to be the #1 game in the world. I do get, like, has anyone here watched a particular time now? It's like Call of Duty Black Ops 6. And the movement makes me, and I don't care if people put, like, millennial boom or whatever, but generally, like, it's sickening in terms of, like, I don't know if it's fun. I don't know if it's fun.
Yeah, but it's that whole thing of, like, Call of Duty has always been chasing. We want to be like Halo. We want to be like Quake. We want to be like, and then Halo was like, oh, Halo 4. We want to have loadouts. We want to be like Call of Duty. And there's this continual, like, jerking off of other franchises in the space where it's like, we want to be like this because it's successful, rather than we want to be successful because of what we do ourselves. And so many games it's kind of like with movies, with TV shows, with books, with games. There's always a struggle between, we want this product to be successful, but if we do our own thing, the risk is so high. It's much easier to copy paste what other successful things have done to mitigate the risk. And by doing so, they become derivative and boring. And, like, I'm sure Colin remembers when Halo Reach started to have, like, the sprint mechanic in the game. Everyone was livid with, like, Spartans can sprint now, and then armor lock, and then they did the next game, and it's like, oh, we're not going to have armor lock, we're not going to have sprint, but it's like, we're going to have sprint. It's going to be more Call of Duty-esque, and we're going to have loadouts. It's like, but it's an arena shooter, and you want to pick up the high-powered weapons in the space, and you want to contest them, and, like, there are so many. There's always a struggle between profit and enjoyability, and, like, just look at Destiny. Really, really enjoyable game. If you look at the fundamental, like, gunplay, phenomenal. Best possible way to make a gun go bang, 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 and be satisfying to go bang, 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 bang. But you fight the same enemies over and over and over again. And I think Space Marine 2 has, like, a similar problem where, like, right now we're in the glow of it, but fighting the same Hermagaunts and Raveners and blah, 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 even as we upgrade the weapons, it will start to get old just because you need some variety.
I think, funny enough, like with the Warhammer IP itself, it maybe lends itself more to other developers being able to take a risk, just because with like the Warhammer IP is guaranteed to have some interest in the game, no matter what it is, even if it was if it's just chess, it's just literally regicide chess. So there's a slight blessing in that, but I will say there's also a slight curse to it, which is like there has been some games which has been not like, it's not like a misuse of Warhammer IP. Games Workshop is very careful, and like even if the game is not a fun game necessarily, it's still pretty faithful, and it doesn't really break lore or break your immersion of the Warhammer experience. So they are very consistent. But I think a lot of games that I'm sure people can even think of some games. We'll talk about some in a little bit later. But Balkan's one of the ones where like it definitely, it took that Warhammer IP and it ran with it. I think unless Colin has any other thoughts to add on Bolt Gun, it's kind of just like it's a yep, thanks. We'll have another serving at some point.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's like, thank you for this lovely meal. I'm finished now, but when you have the second course out, let me know. I'll be back.
It's a buffet. Like I'll give me a text. I'll be back. Don't worry. But speaking of the next experience, which is slightly more what Space Marine probably wishes its reception. Oh, sorry, this game wishes it had the reception of Space Marine 2. Next one is Darktide. As recorded now, I think it's nearly 2 years on, possibly more. And me and Colin definitely played the game at launch. I played it a little bit recently, so I've got more current thoughts at the state of the game. I mean, Colin, initial thoughts maybe, or how you feel even now?
Initial thoughts are kind of similar to what I have about Space Marine 2 in some ways, in that I think it's a very good core, but it needs more. The problem is Space Marine 2, at least to me, did not feel like a game intended for you to sink 5 million hours in. Darktide very much was, and with that in mind, the sin of not having enough stuff in it is that much greater, because the unlocking system is not terribly fun. It feels like you don't have a proper class until like level 8 or something, or 10, whatever. I'll be real, it's been so long, I don't remember like the milestone unlocks.
They did respec things, but again, like the actual proper customization of the game is somewhat like, as a regular human instead of a Space Marine, I don't feel like the immediate like my base level is amazing. I feel somewhat weak, which I should do as a human, I guess. But
I'm fine with that building up. It's just I go through the game and it's the same mission every time. It's just like, I mean, it's similar could be said for Vermintide, even more so arguably, because what is it? Vermintide was like Darktide has different mission types compared to Vermintide, which is just kind of get to the end, kill all the rats in the way, or Norsemen. The problem with Darktide is there's not nearly as many like boss encounters during it. It's always going to be the Chaos Spawn or the Nurgle Slug or sometimes the Demon Host, which is a very funny boss, because if you're playing the game in like properly, you're never going to fight it, or at least seek it out. Which,
no reward for killing it, really.
Yeah, and that's something like Vermintide did well. Every single boss in Vermintide, maybe not everyone, but usually they drop the loot dice, so you get better stuff. Whereas Darktide, it's like, oh, I killed a boss. What did I get for it? I lost all my health and ammo. Great, this is wonderful. The assassination mission is the same every time. Every mission plays like the exact same, this is like the biggest like just stupid thing I have. I'll just be real though. The dialogue is so much less fun in Darktide. I know why. It's because it has to account for the fact that there could be one of every class or 4 Ogrins going to McDonald's for the Big Mac meal. So they have to account for far more dialogue variation, whereas Vermintide is like 4 out of 5 of them are going to be present. You only need to account for one of them not being there, and they're all the same character each time. So they can go nuts on the. Sometimes they're just having like a conversation mid-fight. Like it's a proper 1 minute, like just having a talk. Whereas Darktide is guy says line, guy B responds, guy A might respond, and then it's done. We're done talking, back to killing. I hate like the unlocking system. I just do not find fun.
It did lose a little bit of the magic, I think, in Darktide with the lack of character, because I think a lot of Warhammer stuff is carried by character a lot of the time. Like people, when they want to build, there's a reason like people choose particularly tabletop factions, or they choose books to read or something like that. It's because they're generally interested in like who they're going to be reading about, or who they're possibly going to be playing on the game. Like I said, like there's a reason why it's not just a generic Space Marine. It's Lieutenant Titus, and even if he's not the most groundbreaking character of all, you have an investment into it. In Boltgun, I can't remember the name of the Ultramarine.
Malum Kaido.
But then there's some kind of investment in there. I think Darkhide does like it. The weird thing is like it encapsulates Warhammer lore accurately in the sense that humans are treated like completely replaceable filth who mean nothing. Like your human life means nothing compared to a Space Marine who is an angel of the Emperor, angel of death. So the weird thing is it's weirdly loyal to space, like to Warhammer lore, but from a gameplay perspective, that made it less rewarding and less memorable to play. Like Darktide, I think in Vermintide, I still think about like I've had runs where like I was like, oh, it's like on the edge, you know what I mean? Like it was like a really like difficult mission or something like that. Or I remember playing that with my friends. Darktide, I don't think I could distinguish a mission from another one. In terms of like my experience of it. Yeah, even though I played a lot of Vermintide 2 missions, I still felt like I had more of like a differentiation, because I was like, okay, this one I was playing Saltspire, the one I was playing Witch Hunter, or this one I was learning to play Mage, that one. So I felt like I had a different experience going through, whereas Darktide I had same gun.
Yeah, it's also like Vermintide had some better spectacle moments. Like the biggest one, obviously, the end, where you run through a Skaven, like the Skitter Gate. You're in the North Pole now, surrounded by a Chaos Warrior camp. You run back through, and then a Grey Seer hops on a Rattling gun that fires 2 miniguns, or like a Storm Fiend that fires 2 miniguns into the air. I saw that. I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. There's Darktide, you do an assassination mission. It's fun. And, I'll give Darktide its due credit. Banger soundtrack. Absolutely phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
But you do that, and then it's
what's the mission? Yeah, like, what's the finale?
Yeah, you kill the guy, and then you go to the ship. And then you play another assassination mission. You kill the guy. It's the same guy every time. Go to the ship. Same guy. Go to the ship. At least, like, I know Vermintide level was each set levels, but they all had different boss fights. Like some of them were a bit, flubby. The Nurgle sorcerer guy, fucking Roble Sport, like Gurgle Guard, whatever the hell his name. I have no idea what his name was. It's some
Gurgle Fart,
something like unpleasant to say. I didn't like that boss fight, but he was different. He wasn't, he was actually properly different. Another one is like this giant Storm Fiend. One is, or a Storm Vermin. One of them is the Grey Seer on his Rat Ogre. There's a lot of different, like, each level is set, sure, but there's a lot of different boss fights in each of those levels. And some of that, I'll try and be fair. Some of that is by the time I got into Vermintide, it had like 2 years of development, or some Vermintide 2. Like it had some time to cook and for them to add things. I think
as we sit with Darktide now, though, it's almost at a similar point. And
yeah.
I don't know if like someone came up to any of us and asked, I want to get into playing Warhammer games, and if I was recommending like a trio of games, would Darktide be in that list?
I absolutely wouldn't, depending on like what they wanted. It would be like my top 3 list would probably be, depending on genre, Total War, Total Warhammer, Space Marine 2, and then Dawn of War. And then that can vary depending on what their interests are.
It could be a toss-up for the third one. I think again, like I have reservations of like if I would the developer of Fat Shark, if I would again like put my trust into like another game of theirs until like I saw that it was polished and done. I think a lot of Warhammer games are thought like particularly like why if everyone's like wondering why like a lot of people like a lot of us here like are so like kind of very impressed with Space Marine 2 in particular because a lot of Warhammer games I don't think previously before a lot of Warhammer games have had polish.
Yeah,
I'll be honest. I don't think maybe Total War Warhammer was the first one where like again there was a lot to develop about that game. The first one when it came out in 2017, but I still felt like it was a polished game.
I think
and
the
then
first one came out in 2015.
2015, God, it's been a while.
Yeah, because it was Total Warhammer, then obviously 2 and 3.
Total Warhammer 2. At the time of when Total Warhammer 2 was at its end cycle, it was a really good spot, man.
Oh,
it was
yeah,
like, it was like the height.
Three's reputation has gotten better after the Shadows of Change kerfuffle. But yeah, like the end of Total Warhammer 2 was the most hyped.
Well, speaking of, unless Andy, have you had any last takes on Darktide?
I have not played Darktide.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you've seen it. And I think if again, I would say visually, it's very Warhammer. Like it's 100% representation of like authenticity.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think you know what I mean? Like it's just weird. Like I feel like there's so many things are good about it, but I don't know why it doesn't make a bigger number in my out of 10 score. I don't know why. Some missing piece. Something's missing.
I mean, you know me. I'm in full honesty. I'm fantasy biased man, but even with that in mind, I feel like if someone asked me if I should play Darktide, I would just point them towards Vermintide and say this is that game, but better and with rats.
Yeah, it's a more fun experience.
There's one final kick in the ribs, which is that they just reuse Nurgle again. Like, couldn't have been different.
Which also showed like the fact that Space Marine 2 also you could have horde things like Tyranids and it still works. Like, yeah,
no,
I mean,
that's my criticism. Like you could have gone away from Nurgle, you know that, right? Like we could have had a different enemy to fight for Darktide, but you stuck with Nurgle, presumably because you already had all those Vermintide assets.
With the Space Marine site, guys, you got Bolt Gun and Space Marine 2. There's a lot of siege. Like, can we fight some corn? Can we just like have some berserkers, maybe in the horde mode?
That's true. I mean, I guess. Yeah. Are you about to bring up Space Marine? What did have cord?
No, I was going to say like I don't know if necessarily like it's to do with I think what gets people into the series. I think if someone does do something with a corn thing in the future, it'll be exciting to see. But I don't know if it will draw in as many people as things like the Nurgle, the Tzeentch stuff. Slanesh thing is never going to be touched because that's not PG.
Faction has tit.
I think corn could be a good way to do it. I mean, just because big, angry, screaming man, fun to fight. Here's an intense melee battle. Right?
I'm not being funny. Having a poster of Lieutenant Titus arm wrestling a bloodthirster, I'm sure you'll get some leeway with it.
You could get something out of that. I think it's just like I just think Darktide is just a matter of I'm not going to say laziness because I don't think the game devs there are necessarily lazy, but I just do not like the product. The end result is not something I'm a fan
of. Moving on though to perhaps one of the more current, like this game has been around for quite a while, which is a lot of people probably heard of it, which is Total Warhammer 3 as of the current one in all the trilogy of the games. But as in, like for a lot of people, when they talk about what's a Warhammer game, they probably would say Total Warhammer, and they would probably say Space Marine 2 at this point. So these two are like the biggest. It's on their shoulders to very much get people into the setting. Total Warhammer, I have played a lot of these.
Say the hell of getting people into the setting. I think fantasy's existence is on the shoulders of Total Warhammer.
Yeah, there's a slight downside, which is I think when Total Warhammer first popped off, there wasn't necessarily a model. The model range for them
there was nowhere to point. All these
have been discontinued for years, so there wasn't really an avenue to funnel people's like new interest. I think obviously Space Marine 2 is able to funnel people straight into go buy Ultramarines. So they even did videos at the time now where they've shown like you could buy models and make your own custom thing based off of your Space Marine 2 character. So that they know how to capitalize people into the product. Total War Warhammer, based on the Warhammer Fantasy setting, very much like they generated so much interest at the time, and even now, that it almost single-handedly revived an entire setting that GW had let go because it was unprofitable for a few years, which is good to see. Like GW recognize that, like, sharing the IP out to like movies and games will get so many more people into actually buying the stuff, or like listening to lore, or like consuming more of his glorious universes. And Total War Warhammer, I've been a Total War fan since I was a kid, so I was very much like, this is like a perfect marriage of things. Total War Warhammer 1 came out, and again, like, you could tell there need to be a lot of building blocks to be done on it. The previous games of Total War franchise, which have been historical, they had struggled with certain issues with the actual performance of the game. But Total War Warhammer was a absolute banger to come onto the scene. Again, we knew because of the amount of like uniqueness to the Warhammer fantasy setting, like it needed time to like really flesh out the entire world. As it stands, Total War Warhammer 3 has probably like maybe all the games we've even talked about so far. It has the amount of content that is probably within all these games here. It is unrivaled in its scope of like what you can play and what you can experience as a unique faction of Warhammer, in particularly Warhammer Fantasy. I would say that's fair, isn't it, Colin? Like, it's unrivaled in terms of like the amount of content is nearly 10 years worth, isn't it?
Oh yeah, but 3 games that all combined into one with 3 now. I mean, it's
like getting okay, sorry, go ahead.
They're very well selling games. Like Total Warhammer has for quite some time been both the ace in the hole of fantasy and the last thing keeping it relevant.
Imagine like I think particularly like if someone didn't know about Warhammer and they arrived like today to be like, this is a new game, do you want to go play this now? And they see the scope of things to do in Total Warhammer, and like, you've never heard of it before, and this is like a brand new game to you. It must be like almost daunting to see the amount of like things you can get interested in. I don't think anything quite does it better in terms of like selling a universe. But again, it's like 10 years worth of content.
Even during Total Warhammer 2, it was like that, because how I got into Warhammer was the Total War games, at least properly into it, because my friend just gave me a CD key for it that came with this graphics card because he doesn't like strategy games. And he knew I loved Total War. So I hadn't bought it because for a while I was a bit of a historical purist with it. I was like, there's dragons and magic here. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't want to waste the money. But then he gave it to me, and I'm like, oh, you might as well. And then I was hooked.
I think with Total Warhammer, Warhammer 3, particularly as it stands now, it's in a strange spot because, well, first of all, like with many other things, our attention is particularly drawn to like things like Space Marine 2 and maybe other games that have come out in 2024. Some like strong ones like Black Myth Wukong and other things. And like the thing is, there's so many games. Like Elden Ring had a DLC drop this year, which is basically like the size of another game. So one of those things where like it definitely, like, strategy games are designed to like hold you for a long, like, almost fell over there, a long period of time. And I think with Total War Warhammer, it's done such a good job, but I don't know. I feel like it very much is hitting the end of its like life cycle, and I hope in the future Total War again continues to spread out and do more stuff. But Total War Warhammer, again, I just can't go on enough about how many things are good about it. Particularly, like, again, each faction is so well crafted around their lore, particularly as well in terms of like unique play style. Some of the other ones some of the older ones, older DLCs or older factions show their age a little bit. But there's so many characters, like particularly in the book, like Godric and Felix, my boys, they pop up. Like, there's so many things that are just such a good positive note for it. I very much feel though like it needs to sort of wind down and another thing needs to take its place, because as it's currently standing, I think they maybe have exhausted all of the interest in Total War Warhammer 3. What do you think, Colin?
What do you? I'm sorry.
As in, like, I think Total Warhammer 3's life cycle maybe should start wrapping up, and I think, as in, like, so if I want to have like a Warhammer Fantasy game or or something in that slot, I feel like something else really needs to like take the mantle that Warhammer Total War has been carrying for so long, because the game is slightly showing its age.
Yeah, it is. If only because like it's the third one in a sequel, and they're only going to play so differently. I think maybe not like fully start wrapping up, but by this point they should definitely have a roadmap for like how they want to end it. Like figure out like what your last 2 DLCs, make one of them the big final hurrah, get some character everyone wants, which I imagine at this point is going to have to be Thanquol or Nagash,
or both.
Or both. It's gonna I'm here for it. It's gonna have to be one of them. Like they already brought in all the Chaos Dwarfs are here, the Tomb Kings and everything. All the factions are here. They basically invented Cathay from the ground up.
It's like that Super Smash Bros. Melee trailer where it's like everyone's here except for Nagash and Thanquol.
Yeah, it's like let's figure out, get those last ones, and then I'd say like 1.5 to 2 more years, and then it can finally be like, from terms of development, be put to rest. Just because I think there's a couple more things they could definitely add to as close to perfected as they can. I know, like I think there was the one DLC that gave all 4 Chaos Gods their own Warriors of Chaos leader, but I think after that, Nurgle once again is being given the extra love. So like give like 3 more. Ideally, I'd say like 3 more DLCs similar to the last one. The one I believe, forgetting the name.
They did the Zinch one.
Oh yeah, Shadows of Change. It was just awful. So
it wasn't. What's the thing? I think they
not awful, but their pricing issues were.
Yeah, so maybe there's going to be a Khorne, a Slanesh one, and then I think maybe then an End Times, and wrap it up.
Yeah, because I think they have said they're looking into like End Time stuff. So yeah, like 1 for each more god. Each of those DLCs should have like 2 characters for like 2 different factions. Give like everyone else from games 1 and 2 like 1 final hurrah or something, right? Like give them a thanks for being here for this long. Like give 1 more High Elf Lord, 1 more. Pardon me, 1 more Tomb Kings and a character. The Empire just got the one with Elspeth. The Dwarfs got Malachi. So you like give the ones who haven't gotten an extra bit, like give them their 3 package, their big send off. Give us another fella for them, and then like 2 more. Give us the End Times thing, and then give us Nagash and Thanquol if they aren't related. Maybe 3 more if there's just something after that. So I'd say like 4 to 5 more big, like reasonably sized DLCs, and then we can put it to rest and let the modders take over.
I think because particularly with the future of the Warhammer Fantasy setting, I think there's again like Vermintide and Total Warhammer show, like there's so many ways to tackle the setting. It can be from the macro and the micro. I think particularly Warhammer Fantasy, they are, as of time of recording, the elbow is coming back in terms of there's a new time in their setting. So even though the Warhammer Fantasy world is somewhat, there's no like it has an end date, and it turned into Age of Sigmar eventually, which was slightly less popular, but not in terms of model range because those boys cook. Perhaps at this point, there's either 2 options. I think for the Total War franchise, particularly, there may be I theorize they may actually just do Age of Sigmar Total War at some point, or obviously there may be there may be possibilities into the sci-fi, the 40k setting. We're not sure.
I mean, I think Legend said as much, didn't he? How did you guys keep up with Legend of Total War at all?
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, I don't want to. That's why at this point it's still speculation.
Yeah,
we don't necessarily know. because again, there's unfortunately at this time there's been so much like on and off. We don't know what's happening with a lot of game companies these days. Like they say things and then like Destiny 2 gets cancelled, or sorry, Destiny 3 gets cancelled. Sorry, like, or so we never 100% sure. But in terms of speaking for like the future of like Warhammer gaming, 40k I think is represented really well at the moment, and I think it will continue to be represented really well, particularly if AAA studios get to work on things with this franchise as well. But then also kept in line ruthlessly by Games Workshop to not be like over monetize the crap out of our consumers, particularly with the fantasy setting. I don't know what your thoughts are, Colin, about what you think particularly would be a good idea, or like things you would look forward to in terms of a like, you know, oh, would you want a more narrative built game? Because Warhammer Fantasy has the option of so many narratives to follow. Do you want more grand strategy, or do you think that's kind of been exhausted, or is there more things like a version of Space Marine 2, but it's more of a Warhammer Fantasy version of it?
I think I'm good on the strategy. I think Total War, even after they're done updating it, I'll always come back to it, even for just a little bit. So I think that's fine. I would say for some kind of RPG, that'd be cool to go around, you know, the Warhammer Fantasy world, even just one, you know, like the Empire or something like that. That'd be cool, like a Elder Scrolls alike, or I'd really like a Souls-like set in Warhammer Fantasy. There's a lot of stuff that could be cool bosses to fight.
My God.
Chaos Spawn, like demons, obviously, but also like ogres would be fun. You can have the biggest threat in a FromSoft game is when the enemy boss is the size of you, roughly. So a Dwarf Slayer boss fight would be a whole lot of fun if they somehow figure that out. There's a lot of different things that I would kill for a Warhammer Souls-like, especially because that would be a way to make the end times slightly less miserable. Dark Souls' whole thing is the world is going to hell, and the end times was the world going to hell. So, hey.
Yeah, I even dare say a Telltale game with the actual like story-driven one. I'd give it a go. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but I don't mind those kind of games.
Fair enough.
I played a lot of Total War games, and I will probably continue to do so, but my draw is more towards the historical at this point, just because of like I feel like it's its own topic, but it's like there's a gap I feel needs to be.
I would kill someone for either Elder Scrolls Total War or Medieval 3. One of those two things I would be a violent man for.
Wow. You would hesitate to call the police or the ambulance or someone.
May I pitch an idea similar to that?
By all means.
Could you imagine you play as an Inquisitor, and it's a Fallout 4 style game with Fallout New Vegas, where there's factions in the Imperium, and you have to balance how you interact with all of them, and you have companions, and you get to go in hive cities, and you get to planet hop, like Outer Worlds mixed with New Vegas.
Outer Worlds with a setting, you mean? Outer
yeah,
Worlds,
exactly.
It isn't
exactly
lukewarm, nothing burger narrative and setting.
Exactly.
I think particularly like the options of what Warhammer games are going to be going forward. So this is more like towards the end here. And I do want to finish on like a nice like positive note, because even though we have said like some negative things about some of the games we are playing, I will state like a lot of these games mentioned I have enjoyed, and I have put loads of hours into pretty much most of them. So again, and that's more just like it made me into more of a Warhammer fan than it ever detracted. But I think particularly like with the future of what Warhammer games can be, because again, like we're in a good spot, I think, at the moment. In all like seriousness, again, like we can see it even on the interest in, particularly on our YouTube channel. We see people are like, loads of comments, people who are saying they are just getting into the setting and they're learning about it, and we welcome you to this like silly, chaotic, tragic but badass time. Warhammer is amazing. And I think particularly with the future of it, I feel like we're in a good spot. And I do think maybe like with Games Workshop being more careful about who they give out the IP to, they just need to keep hitting that, hammer in, hit that nail in, and then keep the thing hot. Because I think a lot, like if this is followed up with another game is like announced like a year from now, which is like of equal sort of size and scope to what Space Marine 2 is, it's almost a guarantee. Like I feel, well, maybe not necessarily next year, but after the Amazon project comes to light, and then there's another thing to kind of like get a wave going, I'm just going to be super happy. I hope, again, it depends what Games Workshop goes to. I have a feeling there's a serious lack of what is serious consideration for what is Age of Sigmar. I think Age of Sigmar right now struggles with the fact like it's hard to grasp for a lot. Like you can see the model range. I think from a tabletop perspective, people are very into it. But I think as it turns like a setting, Space Marine 2, people can get Warhammer Fantasy, they can get. I think there needs to be some version of a high budget, a lot of high effort game where Age of Sigmar is sort of grounded and it's turned into a setting in which people can go, oh, I can actually like dip my feet into and I can be interested in this thing because this game really got me into it. Yeah, it's just a bit. Yeah, it needs something. It needs something like that. I don't know if you guys want to finish on anything like particularly positive. You guys found obviously, even though this will be like a rant thing, we obviously want to not. I don't necessarily like always ending. There's a lot of things where people make rants on, particularly in our Warhammer community, and it's always like it just leaves you depressed at the end because you feel like Warhammer's dying. Like Warhammer, I feel like it's always like. I know it's changing. The thing is, it's going to change every decade for me at some point. I think if I look at those goblin green bases and those like Skittles paint jobs, I'm like, okay, that's not the Grimdark. You know what I mean? Like things are it'll probably look different from now. Hopefully they understand their uniqueness and they're gonna sort of stay with it. Has anyone got any like particularly things that like they want to see, or they're like maybe like that was like a how you feel about the current state of where we are?
I don't know. I mean, I think Warhammer Gaming is at a very good point right now. I think there's some things it can definitely do to capitalize off, like we said. Like Space Marine 2's done a wonderful job bringing people in. I don't think it's definitely going to lead to a big. I mean, we've talked about it. Our channels have all done quite well with the influx of views with it. I think for Games Workshop itself, though, maybe put a bit more emphasis on these games because there's very clearly interest in it. Critical was streaming it. I saw him doing it. And in terms of like average, like just YouTube, like user, like way to gauge opinion, Critical going for something is a great way to show that, goddamn, there's a lot of popularity going into this right now. So capitalize that on a bit. Don't just try and go, now buy the 1,000 Sons of Combat Patrol box, 20 Zangors, please. Put some effort into the games. And I do think if they keep going as they have been the last year, I think both will get a whole lot of good games out of it. And the hobby will probably get an influx too. I'm not going to say it's in a bad spot though. I think we're in a pretty good spot, all things considered, that could very easily be capitalized on if the right choices are made. Or it could be a one-off and a whole bunch of more people are going to start watching lore videos, and that might be the extent of it, depending on where it goes in the future with, like, I think gaming specifically. Because, like I said, the Total War got me into buying the tabletop shit, and now I've got a lot more models.
Financial debt.
Yeah, now I have a lot more models on assembled purchase, though, than I care to admit. So, if nothing else, as far as the company cares, I've done my part.
One can't like Warhammer and also have diabetes unless they run a YouTube channel.
So, yeah, I think that if some more banging games come out, it'll be both more popular as a setting, and also there will be more people, like me, God, several years ago, which hurts to say now, thinking about how long I've been doing this and aging.
But every day now.
You're in your 20s. Stop complaining.
Yeah,
but
bro's not even 30 yet. Yeah.
But if they do well at the games and stuff, I think like this could be genuinely Warhammer could really finally hugely pop off. But if the games either flop in the future or they just don't make them and don't capitalize on it, then we might be, not going to say, even if that happens, Warhammer's not going to be
We'll just be
dying.
where we were before.
Yeah, well, it just, keep going on as we are now. I'm not going to, but no, Warhammer's not dying. I see enough of that on Twitter by idiots who get angry at something.
I'm sure if I look it up, I'll see a post of it like in 2001 or something. Where people are like, Warhammer's dying. Warhammer's dying.
Warhammer's been dying for 40 years. It's a very long, drawn out, successful death.
I think Warhammer will always.
You do remember that, like, one of the most popular characters is a Necromancer from the fantasy settings. Like, you're not going to kill Warhammer with Nagash in play.
He's just going
not being funny. Yeah.
Well, I think Warhammer does change though. Like, it doesn't.
It changes, and
I find like if ever people think like with Warhammer particularly, this might be its own topic, one like for its own video. But if you want to think of like, was it changing its like sort of vibe? I think it's just more like they just have their own lanes. Like if you look at Codex art, all the Chaos ones is very grimdark. All the Orc stuff, but if you look at like the Orc books recently, it's like cartoony and poppy because it's like that's their vibe. The Necron one looks like Mosaic, like old style paintings. Space Marine ones look like clean sci-fi in some way. Like, so I think, very much like it has its own people who were more into like each part of the hobby. You are like funneled into the lanes of which still has that feeling towards it.
But not being funny, the lens you look at the lore is how you will interpret it. You can look at the Space Marines through the lens of it's grimdark, or they are sparkly sci-fi, or if they're good guys or terrible bad guys. It's like the lens you look at the lore. Yeah, you can interpret it however you want. You can look at like Space Marine 2 and be like, oh, this cherub is a bit messed up. It's like, yes, it is. But if you ignore that, you can still be like, they're good boys doing the good fight for good guys. But if you look closely, you can also be like, oh, this place is dreadful. Oh my God, what's going on here? Oh, the guardsmen are dying in droves. Oh no! Like
in the grimdark future, there's only pain.
Yeah, however you interpret it is up to you. That's up to you. That's fine.
Any final thoughts, Andy? Any positivity, particularly?
Or I mean, I think this is a hefty injection into the community. We've now got like Colin was saying with Moist Critical and a bunch of people getting into the lore. There are so many people like this is it's not quite a once in a lifetime, but it's definitely like once in like a full moon sort of thing where it's like this kind of event happens once every decade or so. And people are really enjoying the game. People are really getting into the lore. Video games get more sophisticated every year, despite the best efforts of game developers. Like the graphics keep getting better, the scope keeps getting better, the limits keep getting more expansive. As long as you have people like, as far as I can tell with Saber Interactive with this game, it's like as long as people who care about the setting work on it, you can't really go too wrong. And I think they've done a great job. Like the little details, the minutia, whether it's the big battle barge stuff, or it's the character models, or it's a variety of free customizations that you can unlock as soon as you have the in-game currency to like make your own Genesis chapter or Size of the Emperor or whatever. It's like that's already there. And you can tell they put their heart and soul into it, and I really respect that. Hopefully, this will be a linchpin moment where other game studios will go, wow, people really enjoyed that Space Marine game. There was already a cultivated fandom to make it successful, and everyone else rallied around them and made it really good. So hopefully this will be the first of many great triumphs for the Warhammer studios of video game stuff. And long may it continue, hopefully. I mean, not being funny, Hired Gun, as far as I can tell, is fairly fun. Bolt Gun was good. I played that. I haven't played, but I've seen Chaos Gate and it looks really good. Like they're on a bit of a roll recently with like good FPS, third-person shooters, top-down tacticals. Like they're doing a nice spread of games recently. So as long as they can continue to do that, and for attrition, just having a nice amount of good, not necessarily like game-changing games, but like solid, fun games. Hopefully, that will get more people into the lore. get more people into the setting, and that's good for everyone.
Hell yeah. We will say that if everyone has any opinions on certain games, please do put them in the comments below, because we want to know what you guys actually, because obviously not everyone has the same experience. I know there are people who are like played a lot of Dark Tide, and there are people who are like really enjoying it because they're at like the highest like difficulty runs with like max builds, and it's a different experience. So that there's often a bit of disparity. But let us know how you particularly feel about the current state of what Warhammer gaming is, because again, we don't have a monolith opinion. Not everyone is. It may be like what Colin said, that just a small bump, or it may be like this is a first of like, oh, here come all the classics. So want to know how you guys feel, or which ones you're actually playing, or perhaps which one you had the most amount of fun with. I still think the old school Dawn of War games were still gonna always have a special place in my heart. But again, if you made this far, please do like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And thank you guys so much for watching, for listening. And we'll probably doing more of these like pre-recorded stuff for you lore criminals who said that you missed. I think we saw what you said, that you missed having some pre-recorded stuff. We're going to do a bit more of that just on the side as well, to sort of, a bit more love. And we'll see you all guys soon. Peace.
See you, everyone.
Bye-bye.